Greetings from West Baltimore. I'm Twig Harper. So, as a Baltimore resident, when there was the study published from the Hopkins group of psilocybin can occasion mystical types of experiences, that was, a pretty big bombshell of no duh, but pretty good for the scientific community. People were pretty amped around here in Baltimore, and people were like, oh, that's great, this work is happening, and it's right here. So around 2008, there was information put out being looking for psychedelic drug users. And it was happening in the Behavioral Pharmacology Research Unit at Bayview at Hopkins. And the forums and the information is that you will be getting something psychedelic. It may not be psilocybin, it may not be, any of these compounds. And people are telling me stories. Oh yeah, I got, LSD, I must have gotten mescaline, this kind of thing. People were coming out saying all these different things. And I was like, wow, this is pretty fascinating. So I decided to, take the plunge. And, we all think we're pretty smart. When people would tell me they were getting LSD, I'd just be like, well, how long did it last? Are they really administering LSD? Do they have approval for that? In my mind, did a handful of these sessions, and there was certain qualities. I'd be like, oh yeah, this one was definitely psilocybin. No, that was nothing. That must have been, this must have been Adderall. I don't know what, whatever this placebo stimulant they were giving. But so in my mind, I started to see, I see the pattern, right? We're good at pattern makers, even though it may be a randomized distribution of drugs. We don't know. No one was told. And I think the sitters were also blind, so they didn't influence our consciousness taking these drugs. But I was pretty convinced that I was getting, different sessions. One was psilocybin and one was DXM, because I would have one session that was super DXM-y. It's like, the classical, just goo and ego dissolving, this kind of stuff. And then the other ones would be this amazingly beautiful psychedelic connective, spiritual experience. To test the substances and your experiences, one is given mystical states questionnaires. And so these are questionnaires that were developed to measure mystical states of consciousness. So the idea that I knew what I was getting was pretty wrong. And a year or two later, when they published it, come to find out everyone was just given basically DXM. There was no psilocybin given in there. So in my mind, this question of the narrative of what compounds actually do to us versus the set and setting versus the placebo is pretty malleable. And to think that I've had one of the most intense metaphysical spiritual experiences on, basically a cough syrup additive is pretty fun idea in my mind. So yeah, I guess the larger question is, do these drugs actually do what we think we do, or is the set and setting with these compounds actually the more important things? Because if you look back, the Hopkins data, if you look at these studies they do, sure, yeah, of course, using placebos, most of the time you can tell who's gotten psilocybin, who hasn't, right? But there's still also these weird little glitches in there where people are given stimulants and they do report having a complete mystical experience. And I don't doubt people have those. I don't think they're lying on these questionnaires. I think they are having these experiences. For me, that's just wonderful food for thought, because the placebo effect has probably the most potential. What if, in a controlled scientific study, you took the mystical states questionnaire and just really, put like a shamanic states questionnaire instead, and just use all these narratives of people who are using, ayahuasca or shamanic sort of templates of spirit contact and like these snakes or this kind of stuff, because that's the thing. If you're studying for something, you're actually saying, well, we're looking for this, but your desire to look for this is going to manifest that. So this is what's so fun about, the scientific model, because it's very crude tools, but it does start to show us how malleable these spaces, these liminal spaces can be. So belief and placebo are I think they're pretty entwined. You know, placebo is to please. You want to please, right? And your belief system is something you have that you believe. And so it's a pretty nice world, because the idea that the scientific method is the priests of our culture is very valid. And so the idea that placebo is this constant theme in the scientific processes is, somehow it's supposed to safeguard, these ways to test and explore things. But it adds this element that really says, if you really start to think about it, that your belief is maybe more important than anything else. Like, that is what's really there. And it's about power. So if you come into a situation where you give someone more power, you will believe them. And some people do that in any situation. So culturally, we have an interesting thing, because this, scientific model is sort of this very powerful thing, because it's this kind of, objective process. But it breaks down with the psychedelics. A nice little tidbit that I always kind of keep in my head is that reading up on placebo is really great, because there's I think it was a study done with people with Parkinson's, very mind-body kind of ailment. And there was two groups. They're both given placebos, basically not, I think there was basically nothing. But they were both told it was new medication. And the one who was given, they're just like, yeah, here you go. This is just here's the drug. We're going to see how it's going to work, whatever. They didn't talk it up. It's just sort of this normal thing. We're going to monitor you and do some tests, physical tests, mental tests, see how it goes. And it charted about what they thought it would. And then the second group, they were given the placebo, and they're told, yeah, this is some top of the line drug. This stuff costs a lot of money. And they did much better. People's belief that the drug cost more made them chart better than the other one, because they believed that this drug was because it's expensive, it must be really, cutting edge and valuable. And I think it charted somewhere just under sort of the best medication that's available. So, yeah.